Some tales do not start with great fanfare or renown. They start quietly, in the unobserved corners of daily life. It is in a small martial arts school hidden away in Georgia, beneath flickering fluorescent lights and the smell of sweat and disinfectant, that this man, whom most only knew as Mr. Ray the janitor, went about his business as if he had been doing it for decades, quiet, consistent, singing quiet soul songs and nudging a mop through the very mats that others ran through to pursue greatness. People mostly just passed by him with no second look, perceiving only the uniform, never considering to inquire about what life he may have led before. But what if the most battle-hardened warrior in the room was the one without gloves? What if greatness didn't yell, but cleaned floors at dusk? On an average evening, with only humility in his stance and serenity in his gaze, Mr. Ray walked onto the mat, not to demonstrate something, but merely to respond to a jesting challenge. What ensued didn't merely shock an adolescent student, it altered the vibration of a whole room. Because occasionally, strength is not about speed or muscle. It's about history and silence, fights fought off the mat, and the grace to start again when no one is looking. Have we lost the ability to identify wisdom when it doesn't insist on a stage? And in a world that tends to praise volume over value, are we still able to look around and spot the quiet giants amongst us? This is a tale of respect gained and not attained, of the strength of being present and the type of strength that doesn't have to shout. And if you pay close enough attention, you might just find that some of the most powerful lessons in life come from the ones we nearly overlook. Let me tell you what occurred the evening a janitor walked onto the mat and left everyone speechless. It was just another run of the Mill Thursday night at Brickland Martial Arts Academy in a small town in Georgia, the type where the walls contained echoes of discipline and the air always smelled slightly of sweat and lemon-scented disinfectant. The overhead fluorescent lights flickered ever so slightly, humming as they always did as students drilled through their forms, the muffled thumps of kicks and the crisp slaps of punches echoing through the room. Coaches issued orders with crisp voices, and the cadence of practice kept the proceedings churning along like clockwork. You're in all this activity, one man glided unseen along the perimeters, a tall, thin man in his late 60s, methodically driving a mop forward with slow, deliberate motions. His name was Mr. Ray Bennett, but everyone else in the neighborhood of the gym simply referred to him as Mr. Bay. He was the custodian, quiet, courteous, punctual, always humming some forgotten soul standard from decades ago, as if his heart still swayed to a beat most had lost. He wasn't flashy, didn't talk much, and never got in the way. To most, he was background, the mop bucket, or the old punching bags hanging in the corner. That evening, as the final class concluded and some of the younger students hung around, stretching and joking around, one of them, Tyler, a brash college-aged black belt with more spunk than savvy, thought to himself, "It's time to crack a little joke," waving in the direction of Mr. Ray as he moved across the mat with his mop. Tyler smiled and shouted, "Hey, Mr. B, ever consider throwing hands instead of sweeping floors?" A couple of students chuckled, more out of habit than humor. Tyler, riding the wave of attention, pushed it further. "Come on, just for fun. Let's spar around. I'll go easy on you." His tone was light, but there was that edge in his voice, half teasing, half testing. It wasn't mean-spirited, but it carried the kind of youthful pride that often speaks before thinking. Most folks in the room expected the usual response. Maybe a chuckle, a wave of the hand, a humble "Nah, I'm good, son." After all, Mr. Ray was just the janitor. What business did he have stepping onto the mat with a trained fighter? But instead of brushing it off, Mr. Ray did something that stunned the room. He glanced up from his mop, his eyes peaceful, and smiled a little, a playfully nearly smile. "Sure," he whispered. "Why not?" For an instant, the whole room stood still. You could hear the hum of the ceiling lights, the sound of traffic far away outside. All the students ceased whatever they were doing. Two instructors turned their heads. Tyler blinked, wondering if he'd heard correctly. "Wait, you serious?" He laughed nervously and asked. Mr. Ray placed the mop carefully back in the bucket, stood up straight, and gave a dignified nod. "Just for fun, like you said." The gym's tension had shifted, like a page had been turned in a book. No one was even aware they were reading. Something about the way Mr. Ray just stood there, steady, unflustered, not cocky, not anxious, felt different. He didn't posture. He didn't puff out his chest. He simply looked like the kind of person who was exactly where they were meant to be. Tyler, not the type to back down from someone in public, smirked and cinched his belt tighter. "Okay then, Mr. B, let's dance around." Stepping onto the mat, even the coaches fell silent. No one had any idea what would happen. Most expected it to be a friendly bout, an old man going at a slow pace, perhaps landing a few punches before abandoning the attempt. But some, such as Coach Davis, observed with narrowed eyes, feeling that something more was going on. Perhaps it was the way Ray walked slow, measured, but erect, or perhaps it was the quiet assurance on his face, the gracious way he bowed and not a trace of fear. Whatever, one thing was certain, this was no ordinary janitor, and what ensued next would leave all people in that gym utterly speechless. Mr. Ray walked away from his cart, slowly removed his frayed work gloves, and put them nicely next to his mop bucket. He stepped onto the mat without uttering a word, with the kind of serenity that brought even the most experienced fighters to a stop. No hurry in his pace, no uncertainty in his stance, only silent assurance, as if coming home to a place he never actually left. Some students off to the side giggled quietly to themselves, elbowing one another, thinking the old man was simply attempting to make a joke or draw a conclusion. However, their laughter ceased when Coach Davis, the head instructor of the academy, a man who had had his share of fighters pass through life, sat up a bit taller, squinting his eyes, and called out in a measured voice, "Ray, you sure about this?" Nothing mocking in his tone, no condemnation, only a flash of recognition, as though something old and half remembered was waking in the back of his mind. Mr. Ray nodded too, no words necessary, no need for bluster. He was quiet, relaxed, as if this were home ground. And the thing was, it was, though no one in that gym knew it. Ray Bennett had once been a rising name in the martial arts world, not the loud, showy kind you see on television or viral clips. No, Ray came up the hard way, back in the gritty 1970s when tournaments were held in school gyms, church basements, and musty rec centers with crowds cheering from folding chairs and rings marked with duct tape. He wasn't flashy, but he was sharp, quick, intelligent, a technician on the move. He trained alongside names who'd one day become legends, guys who'd show up in the magazines, start schools around the nation, even teach abroad. Ray earned respect the old-fashioned way, late nights, split lips, and a silent discipline that never required a crowd. He fought around the Southeast, then further. Small town tournaments, underground circuits, even sparred against military hand trainers on some bases. While he was volunteering in youth outreach, folks began to talk about that Ray kid from Georgia. He wasn't being a celebrity. He just loved the art, the quiet it provided, the framework, the clarity it lent to a mad world. But as so many dreamers, his was cut short by life. An emergency call home. His mother had taken ill. Ray packed up his gear, dropped out of a tournament midweek, and never glanced back. He cared for her until the final breath. Then came the bills, the funeral, the slow disintegration of the life he'd been constructing. He took whatever work he could, construction, warehouse, driving. Some came and went. Others paid hardly enough to put food in the belly. He never grumbled, never sought help. And one day he landed a job as a janitor at a martial arts school, a peaceful setting that recalled the rhythm he had once known. He observed students spinning and kicking and yelling. He mopped the same mats on which he had bled. And periodically, after the very last light had gone out, he'd fight the darkness, shadowboxing, just to sense that old spark rekindle once more. But he never told anyone, not because of shame but humility. To him, the past was past. He didn't require anyone to applaud for him. He'd had his moment, and now he was merely happy to be near the sport he used to love. Nobody at Brickland ever stopped to question him. He was simply Mr. Ray, the sweet old man who cleaned the mirrors and nodded gently with a warm smile. And so, but that night, being barefoot on the mat again, Ray was more than the janitor. He was a man returning to a corner of himself that never actually went away. Though the students surrounding him still didn't know his history, there was something about the way he walked, the way he stood, that was now saying a lot. Tyler cinched his gloves, jumping up and down on his toes, his smile expansive and a bit too cocky. "Okay, mister." "B," he said jokingly, but also curious, just light. "Okay, you cool with that?" He sounded like a boy who was used to having things his way, like a young lion who doesn't know there's an older one in the room who's fought a lot more battles. Mepter, Ray didn't answer back in words. He just gave the smallest, most respectful bow and calmly said, "Of course." No ego hint, no sharpness in his tone. Presence, the kind of presence that isn't reliant on volume to be heard. Coach Davis, now standing over there with arms crossed, gave a slight nod to the assistant instructor, who rang the bell, and so it started the spar. Tyler moved rapidly. He was young, trained, and quick. His footwork was fluid, his punches sharp, and his confidence at an all-time high. Negate lost around the mat like a boxer running through drills, delivering playful jabs designed to challenge Mr. Ray's responses. The students who watched laughed softly, thinking that this was going to be done in a minute, but Mr. Ray did not move at all. He stood unchanging, eyes serene, following each movement with the studious concentration of a man who had done this much longer than anyone in the room could possibly imagine. His feet moved just enough, his stance relaxed and watchful, as if a man hearing music only he could hear. Then, in one smooth motion, he stepped outside the arc of Tyler's jab, leaned slightly forward, and extended to touch the tip of two fingers to Tyler's shoulder. Point for an instant, no one moved. Then a few snickers escaped. Tyler shook his head, laughed it off, but there was a flash of surprise behind his eyes. They started again, bell again. Tyler entered quicker this time, delivering a rapid combination, but Ray, seemingly without effort, rolled his shoulder, shifted his back foot, and deflected all the punches with minimal action. Then tap, another point. The room fell silent, no more laughter. Tyler's smile was breaking now, his breathing more labored. Another round started. This time Tyler struck lower, shifted angles, attempted to surprise him, but Ray's defense was water, like he rounded the attacks, never engaging them head on, turning their energy against them. Another step aside, another tap. Another point. At this point, the students were rising. A few were in a hushed conversation. Coach Davis hadn't budged an inch. His arms remained crossed, but his forehead was creased now. He was observing intently, learning about this man who had somehow managed to fall below everyone's notice for so many years. Ray did not gloat. He did not taunt. He did not even smile often. He was just there, calm and charged and elegant in every step. His hands glided as though they knew something his lips didn't have to say. Tyler Madden now pressed harder. He spun his kicking foot, then pretended low and struck high. But Mr. Ray had already anticipated. He waited, anticipated the setup, and with a subtle flick of his foot and the slightest inclination in his balance, removed Tyler from his center. Tyler's legs buckled, and with an exclaimed grunt, he landed on the mat with a quiet but unmistakable thud. The room gasped. Even the assistants, who were hardly ever responsive to sparring sessions, were now looking around at one another, attempting to comprehend what they'd just witnessed. Tyler blinked up at the ceiling in a daze, not injured, merely shocked. Coach Davis finally moved forward, arms falling to his sides. Who are you?" he asked, not with accusation, but with the soft wonder of a man who just witnessed something he couldn't quite understand. Mr. Ray, tall but humble, bent down and extended his hand to the young man on the floor. Tyler accepted it, stood up with a combination of respect and befuddlement, and looked at the man he'd previously regarded as just the janitor. Ray just smiled, dusting from his shirt. "Just an old man who remembers a few things," he stated, voice low, as though he was speaking to himself. The gym fell quiet for an instant. No drills, no clatter, no ego, only respect. It hovered about in the air like incense. In a building where belts and titles normally spoke the loudest, it was obvious something far greater had just been exposed. Ray hadn't merely won a spar, he demonstrated to them something. That domination isn't necessarily boisterous. That moment does not have to come in a uniform to be true, and that the strongest voice in a room is often the one you never considered looking at. When the match was over, no one stood up, no one returned to practice, no drills began again, no talking began again, no talking began again. The vibes in the gym had changed, like the air in the room held its breath, trying to get what happened. The students who had been stretching stood in stunned silence now, towels slung over their shoulders, water bottles abandoned. A couple of younger students, wide-eyed, glanced between Tyler and Mr. Ray as if seeing them both for the first time in a whole new light. Tyler, still panting and swabbing the sweat from his forehead, approached Mr. Ray, no longer smiling, but with something more authentic respect, interest, and perhaps a touch of humility. "Sir," he asked quietly, hesitantly, almost like a student who didn't quite know how to ask the question, "why did you never tell us?" Mr. Ray, still serene, still humble, simply shrugged with a soft half smile, as if the entire affair didn't amount to anything. "Didn't think it mattered," he explained. "You all had your own path. I had mine." There was no brag in his tone, no secretive bitterness, just candor stated in plain language. And in that single instant, something in the gym silently shifted. The students, particularly the young ones, the very same students who once walked by him without a greeting, now started to view him in a different light. It wasn't grand, and it wasn't instantaneous, but it was genuine. They started greeting him by his name, asking him questions during water breaks, pushing chairs toward him when he stood for too long. A few of the more inquisitive ones hung around the mop bucket at quitting time, waiting for him to spill another anecdote, another secret, another soft jewel from a life obviously full of things they hadn't yet experienced. And Ray didn't do much differently. He still came every evening at 6 p.m. sharp, pulling his cart and humming the same soft soul music, going through the routine with that same quiet ease. But then one afternoon, a week or so after the spar, Coach Davis caught sight of something new. Ray wasn't sweeping. He was wrapping a white belt around his waist. A clean, brand new belt, beginner's level. Coach Davis had come up to him and said, "Ray, what's this?" And Ray, smiling with that same unassuming warmth, simply said, "Figured I'd start fresh, learn all over again." Never hurts to revisit the basics. It was the kind of thing only someone truly wise would say. From that point on, Ray became more than the man who cleaned the mats. He became part of the fabric of the gym's learning environment. He never asked for a title, never required a class. But somehow, others began to watch him. The way he adjusted a stance here or corrected a grip there. Coach Davis finally took his assistant instructors aside and remarked, "I've been at this academy 15 years, and I don't believe I've ever seen a more talented set of hands onto this mat." And that wasn't merely about technique, it was about presence, humility, timing, and the sort of leadership that doesn't draw attention to itself. Eventually, students would stop their own sparring to question Ray. Some would even ask him to assist them with footwork or balance training. And he always did, never as a master, never as a superior, but as a person who simply wanted to share. The atmosphere of the gym started to change. It grew warmer, more respectful. There was less ego in the air, less posturing, more listening, more patience, and Ray, he remained the same, quiet, steady, thoughtful. Still cleaned up trash that others bypassed. Still cleaned the mats after class, even though someone else might have volunteered to do it for him. Because to him, the task didn't diminish him. If anything, it kept him earthbound. And gradually, over the weeks that followed, the tale of that evening, the evening Mr. Ray, the janitor, cleaned the mat and the floor, became the stuff of legend at the academy. Not in the way tall tales are told with exaggeration and awe, but in the way quiet truths are passed down from one student to another. Uni B. Ray, the janitor, had become Mr. Ray, the teacher, undefined not because he asked to be undefined, but because his life, his spirit, and his humility made people want to learn. Mr. D. Ray Bennett's story didn't go viral on the internet or make the night news, and that was just the way he wanted it. But in town, around diners, barbershops, churches, and grocery stores, people were talking in the kind of unflashy way that counts most. Strangers who had passed him for years without even a second look now slowed down, nodded, sometimes even threw in a "Mr. Ray, how you doing today?" He never requested such attention, never sought it, but it arrived anyway, not through duty, but out of sincere respect. A local newspaper reporter caught wind of what had happened and came by the academy one evening with a notebook and a curious smile, hoping to turn Mr. Ray into a headline. But Ray, true to form, just chuckled softly and said, "No thank you, son. I'm not looking to be anybody's story. I've had my fill of spotlights a long time ago." And with that, he went back to wiping down the mirrors and humming his favorite Sam Cooke tune, as if nothing at all had changed. But something had changed, not just in the gym, but in the people. Because what Ray left behind wasn't fame for a moment, it was a message that went deep into the hearts of everyone who witnessed it. That message didn't require a microphone. It rang in the simple manner in which students now held themselves. Minced, a bit more modest, a bit more conscious. He reminded everyone, including those watching, that skill isn't always boisterous, and greatness does not require a spotlight to exist. At times, the greatest lessons are learned from the ones we take for granted. The ones who speak softly, who go quietly, who've weathered tempests and yet appear each morning with poise in their gait and compassion in their eyes. Mr. Ray instructed them, never once formally teaching, that greatness is more about how softly you bear your strength and less about how hard you hit. That patience, humility, and heart tend to trump talent, noise, or title. And perhaps most significantly, he demonstrated that beginning anew, at any age, is not weakness. It's wisdom. A white melt at the waist of a master did not diminish him. It enhanced him. It enhanced him. In a society where so many individuals seek approval, Mr. Ray opted for peace. He didn't require applause. He didn't require belt colors, medals, or trophies. He simply required a mat, a mop, and an opportunity to continue to show up, do his part, give back what he had learned from life. He had battled his demons, not all of them on the mat, and emerged whole, not bitter, not broken, gentle, grounded. And perhaps that's the true center of his narrative, because sometimes the toughest fighter in the room isn't the one tossing punches or bellowing commands. It's the one who's lived, who's loved and lost and worked, who's familiar with pain but does not hand it down. It's the one who gets up again and assists others too as well. It's the one with a mop in one hand and peace in the other. And in the secluded corners of Brooklyn Martial Arts Academy, that legacy lingers not on plaques or posters, but in the manner in which individuals move, the manner in which they bow a little deeper, listen a little longer, respect a little more fully. Because Ray Bennett did not wish to be a headline, but he became something much greater. He became a reminder that genuine respect isn't something that is worn, it's earned in the background, day by day. Sometimes life puts quiet people in the shadows, those who bear profound wisdom, not in titles or in trophies, but in the way they inhabit the world with humility and with heart. Mr. Ray did not require a spotlight to be significant. He didn't request attention. He just came, did his work, and clung to the dignity that results from living a life of purpose, even when no one else sees it. And perhaps that's what this story teaches us, that greatness is not always obnoxious, that strength sometimes has a soft face. We each have pages we don't talk about, things we've been through, lessons we carry in silence. But occasionally, life presents us with an opportunity to share them, not to show off, but to give. And when we do, everything can be changed. So the next time you bump into a person who appears to be ordinary, stop, because you could be standing in front of someone extraordinary.